Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're tackling a massive, universal challenge. Honestly, it's a headache for anyone sitting in a product leadership seat. We're talking about that elusive goal of shifting away from those anxiety-inducing deadline-driven feature lists and moving toward roadmaps that your executives actually trust. If you've ever presented a roadmap and felt like you were just making promises you weren't entirely sure you could keep, well, this explainer is built specifically for you.
Most product roadmaps are a polite fiction. Man, that hits hard, doesn't it? Because it's entirely true. Just think about your last big alignment meeting. You put up a timeline, the execs in the room nod along, they smile, they agree to the whole shebang. But then, fast forward 6 weeks, and they're asking you the exact same questions they asked in that first meeting. The alignment wasn't real. It was just a polite fiction, kind of like a temporary peace treaty based on a list of deliverables that literally everyone secretly knows will probably change. So which brings us to the absolutely critical question we need to answer today. Why do executives stop trusting these roadmaps in the first place? What's the actual mechanism of that trust breaking down? When you're in the trenches, it feels like you're doing everything right by giving them a solid schedule. But from their perspective, something entirely different is going on. Keep this question in the back of your mind as we go through this, because we're going to dismantle this problem completely before giving you the exact framework to fix it.
Here's our roadmap for the explainer today. 1. The polite fiction. 2. Outputs versus outcomes. 3. Now, next, and later. 4. The trust-building narrative. And 5. Evidence over gut feel. Consider this your solution map for moving from broken trust to absolute alignment.
Section 1. The polite fiction, where trust breaks down.
We really need to explore why the traditional roadmap fails so spectacularly and why the old way of doing things doesn't just waste time, but actively damages your credibility. I'm sure this timeline looks painfully familiar, right? Q1, design the feature. Q2, build the feature. Q3, launch it. Q4, frantically chug coffee and fix all the bugs. We present these timelines as if software development is some perfectly predictable factory assembly line, but come on, we all know it's usually chaos. When you hand an exec a timeline like this, you're walking straight into a trap, because the absolute second you hit a roadblock in Q2 and that build phase slips, the entire downstream timeline collapses. And when dates slip, the narrative in the boardroom isn't, wow, software is hard. Nope. The narrative becomes, this team doesn't know how to deliver. And that brings us to 2 core failures. First, dates that slip destroy credibility, period. You can have the best excuses in the world, but broken promises erode trust. And second, feature lists conflate strategy with scheduling. This is a massive insight. Giving your executive team a chronological list of features is not a product strategy. It's literally just a scheduling exercise disguised as a strategy. You're telling them when you're working, but completely missing the why it actually matters to the business.
Section 2. Outputs versus outcomes, the paradigm shift. Now, what's really interesting here is the exact mindset shift required to cure that polite fiction. Let's clearly define what this means. Outcome-based road mapping is the shift in focus from delivering specific features, which are your outputs, to achieving measurable business results, which are your outcomes. An output is just a thing you built. An outcome, though, that's the actual change in customer behavior that drives real business value. So if you want executives to trust you, you have to stop speaking the language of outcomes and start speaking the language of outcomes, because at the end of the day, outcomes are what pay the bills.
Let's compare these directly to make this abstract concept incredibly tangible. Take an output, like, in Q2, we'll redesign onboarding. An executive looks at that and thinks, okay, but why do I care? Now contrast that with an outcome. In Q2, we'll reduce time to activation from 4 days to 24 hours. Do you see the difference there? It's huge. The outcome speaks directly to the business. It shows you actually understand the commercial reality of the company. It proves that you aren't just shipping a feature to check a box. You're actively moving the needle.
All right, Section 3. Now, next, and later, the timeline alternative.
So, if we aren't going to use those rigid, completely fake dates from Q1 to Q4, what do we actually do instead? Well, this is the solution right here. The now, next, and later framework. Categorizing your work into these 3 distinct buckets lets you manage executive expectations while keeping the flexibility you absolutely need. Now is your committed work in progress. You're actively building this and you have high confidence in it. Next is directionally committed. You know you need to tackle it, but the exact scope, that might shift based on what you learned during the now phase. And later is simply strategic intent. It's on the radar, but it's totally flexible. This framework is a real game changer because it allows you to communicate priority without backing yourself into a corner with an arbitrary date.
Moving right along to Section 4, the trust-building narrative, a 5-part formula. Just having the right framework isn't quite enough, you know? You also need to know exactly how to present it when you're standing in a room full of leaders to build that unwavering trust. Let's break down this narrative flow. First, accountability for last quarter. Start by owning what happened, good or bad. It instantly establishes credibility. Second, remind them of the North Star outcome. Like, what is the ultimate business goal here? Third, present your roadmap with 3 bets. Just 3 high-conviction initiatives. Keep it super focused. Fourth, and honestly, this is an absolute superpower. Explicitly state what you are not doing. Telling execs what's out of scope proves that you're actually prioritizing, rather than just saying yes to everything. And finally, step 5. End with an explicit ask. What do you need from them? Is it budget, headcount, alignment? Drive it to a clear, undeniable conclusion.
And our final stop, section 5, evidence over gut feel, contextualizing your metrics.
Presenting a beautiful narrative means absolutely nothing if you can't back it up. So the crucial point is, let's look at this activation metric, 28%, targeting 40% by Q2. Just pause and let that raw data sink in for a second. If you present this metric in a total vacuum, an executive is going to look at it and say, great, 40% is higher than 28%. But why is 40% the magic number? Is the juice really worth the squeeze to get us there? The raw number alone just doesn't justify the engineering effort.
You have to anchor that previous number with this vital piece of context. Hitting that target improves retention 12%. Boom. This is what actually secures executive buy-in. You aren't just trying to bump up activation for the sake of some vanity metric. You're connecting the activation rate directly to a massive improvement in retention. You're proving that your product roadmap is a powerful lever for overarching business health.
And managing all of these connections, that's exactly where purpose-built tools come into play. The source material highlights platforms like Specky to bring this whole thing together. It connects your roadmap items directly to real evidence. Your prioritization traces back to an actual market signal, completely eliminating gut feel decision-making. So when an executive challenges your roadmap, you aren't just sitting there defending an opinion. No way. You're pointing to a direct line of evidence that ties your proposed outcome to a verified business need. It removes the guesswork entirely.
Which leaves us with this final, really provocative thought to help evaluate your own internal processes. Is your roadmap tracing to real signal, or is it just based on gut feel? Are you presenting a polite fiction, or are you driving a measurable outcome? Look, this shift takes discipline, it takes practice, and yeah, it definitely requires moving away from the safety blanket of arbitrary feature dates. But the result? Genuine, resilient executive trust. And that is absolutely worth the effort. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I hope you take these frameworks straight into your next alignment meeting.